Hello, and welcome to Office Hours at Macbeth Academy. I am Kayla Selinsky, head of school at Macbeth Academy, and today we have a very special career day. We have a special guest. Her name is Nicole Kang. She is the co-founder of Elementari.io. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. So, yeah.
Absolutely. This is going to be so fun. So the very first question, I remember when I first met you, I was like, wow, you are so impressive. The first question I have is, how did you get into, first, how did you get from, K-12 to MIT?
Yeah, so I didn't take a very standard approach. I never expected to actually leave my state of Arizona. So I was born in Arizona. Both of my parents were immigrants. My mom is Taiwanese, my dad is Korean. It led to me being very confused about what I was because my dad would always say I'm 50% Chinese, 50% Korean, and 50% American. Don't worry, it adds up in his brain. So, yeah, I didn't actually learn how to speak English until I entered school. So you can imagine the difficulties of that. I almost failed first grade. I didn't enter preschool because my mom didn't know that you should send your kid to preschool. So I just went straight to kindergarten, dumped at the door, and cried all day long.
Oh, no. Did you know English at that time when you went to preschool? Did you know English at that time?
Well, I didn't go to preschool. I learned it in kindergarten. My mom didn't. Yeah, my mom didn't want to teach me any English because she was afraid that because she didn't speak much English, that she would teach me broken English. So she wanted me to learn the proper English in school. So when I was growing up, I learned how to speak Chinese as my first language. And then I went to school and I learned English that way somehow. So
wow. It's amazing. So what was that like? Did you feel, kids are really adaptable. They are strong. How did you feel? Do you remember? I guess looking back, do you remember?
I think the main thing is my mom has a very much of a tough love approach. So she has also like much more powerful story than me because I grew up in the comfort of the United States, whereas she grew up in a time where she wasn't really allowed to go to school. My mom is also much older. She had me when she was like 40 something. So it was different during her time, especially in Taiwan, where if you're a girl, you're not encouraged to go to school at all. Like you go through the primary education and then afterwards you have to pay. And families will only pay for boys because boys are the ones that carry the family name and girls, they just get married off and they're just a waste of money essentially. So during that time period, my mom actually, she went and worked at a factory in the daytime in order to pay for her tuition to go to middle school. Wow. So whenever I complain and be like, it's hard, then my mom would just be like, you know what? My life was hard.
Oh, I know she like passed that strength on to you. So after kindergarten, you learned English, and then how did you get from kindergarten to moving through middle school, high school? What was that like?
Yeah, so I went to a pretty good school. It was in a pretty nice district. Somehow I got in. It was public school because we couldn't afford anything else other than public school. But it was a good public school for the most part. So, of course, there's always some difficulties, especially my elementary period of time where I was in a district that was, completely 99.99% white. Wow. I was the only minority. Like there weren't Hispanics yet in that neighborhood. Later on it changed and it became 99% Hispanic. Right. But during that period of time when I was in elementary school, it was 99% white and nothing else other than that. So you have some kids bullying along the way. I cried. My mom said, stand up. Words don't mean anything. And if they do anything, just kick them, I guess. So don't do that.
Don't do that, but protect yourself. Okay. And then she's tough. Your mom's tough. So how did you get into STEM? How did you get excited about
I didn't get into STEM until pretty much my last year of senior high school. Prior to that, I wanted to be a musician. I planned to become a flutist, and that was the period from 6th grade all the way up until high school, probably junior year. So I was planning to be a flutist, go into music, become a musician, maybe teach on the side, something like that. I entered a couple of programs. One was a math program in Arizona State University. So it was a 6-week long, I think, or 4 weeks long program that was free, geared towards, minority outreach, those type of things. And that was because I didn't want to work at home. So I was just looking for all the free programs I can apply to that would like let me in. And so I don't have to work for my mom over
But it was really competitive, right? Like I remember you telling me it's a really competitive program and highly selective.
Yeah. So the one for Arizona, I don't remember what that was, but then after that summer, I entered into MITES, which stands for Minority Introduction to Engineering Sciences. And that's held at MIT. And it's a 6-week long program, and it's completely free if you get in. So your room, board, teachers, everything is free. You don't have to pay anything. And that's very competitive. It's like, I don't know, 3% get in or something like that, or 4%. I don't really know. I don't know how I got in. It was pretty much probably like, tossed in the air and we'll see what happens. But
it changed the whole course of your life.
It changed the whole course of my life because I didn't know anybody really in STEM at that period of time. The only person I knew in STEM was my family doctor, and that was it. So
wow.
Yeah, my parents never went to college before. So I was the first generation of going into college. And my dad in particular didn't even know what MIT was when I told him I got in. Yeah. He was like, "What's MIT?" I thought you were going to ASU, because ASU was Arizona State University. And that was my plan. So after I entered the summer program, then I really enjoyed it. And I was like, oh, I actually think I can do this as a career, because being good at a subject doesn't mean that you envision yourself doing it.
That's true.
I was always good. I was always good at a lot of things. It doesn't mean I'm going to envision myself doing it. Like, I'm good at knitting. I don't envision myself as becoming a knitter.
Absolutely. So you're at MIT. Wait, so you got into MIT, you're at MIT. So how did you decide on you're going to be an entrepreneur, that you're a coder? Is that day one you knew?
Oh, of course not. So I entered MIT thinking I was going to be a physicist. That ended very, very quickly. Right. I took this like physics for masochist class, and I decided after that, no, I don't really like physics that much. I just like the person who taught physics, and therefore I was like, oh, maybe I want to do it because I like this person. Yeah. Turns out, yeah, it wasn't for me. After that, I changed to computational biology because I was like, oh, I'm going to study viruses.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I realized then I didn't want to stay in a lab forever. And if you wanted to work for the CDC, you need to have like a PhD and like a million years of schooling. So I was like, oh, okay, I don't really want to do that. And during this whole time that I'm taking classes, I'm actually teaching. I taught in different outreach programs at MIT, and I also taught over the summer and winter in Korea. And I ran a STEM program in South Korea with over 100 students. It was first it was just a day camp, but then the next couple of times I ran it, it became a full length camp of 3 weeks long. So it was like they would stay there. Weekends were with me. I had to plan everything. And we brought over about like, I think it was about between 11 to 18 teachers from MIT and Harvard to go to South Korea to run this. And I was the head teacher during that time period. So I realized then that I was doing a lot of teaching and a lot of research and education and
leading.
And that had nothing to do with what I thought I wanted to do with my career. So I kind of went into depression, to be honest.
Yeah. Which is totally normal, by the way. I also did too. When I was at Stanford, I definitely was like, what? Definitely like not a quarter life crisis, but what am I meant to be? So I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I really went into depression because at MIT, when you say you want to go into education, people are like, oh, education, that's so great. Maybe when I retire, I'd like to become a teacher too.
Oh, so is it, how do you interpret that? Is it like looked down upon, or
it's like definitely looked down upon? It's kind of like, oh, if you could be an engineer. Why aren't you doing an engineer? Is it just because you failed at engineering? That's why you want to be a teacher?
Wow.
That's kind of like the feeling you get. And it's not just at MIT. When you talk to anybody really around the dinner table, you're like, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor. And you say, oh, well, I'm a teacher. And they're like, oh, that's so great. You're with kids all the time. So much
Yeah,
fun.
like a daycare. Yeah. What is that?
And it makes you feel like, wait, like, especially since I was at MIT, I'm in an engineering school and I'm not becoming a engineer at the end, even though I took all the classes already to get me that engineering degree. What do I do now? And then you have people going like, oh, if you just wanted to be a teacher, why didn't you go to ASU instead?
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, that's a whole conundrum. What did you, what do you do with that? You sit with it, you were depressed, and then, but you made something came out of it.
Yeah, so you can't major in education at MIT, first of all. So it wasn't like I could be like, oh, I'm going to major in education and then I'm going to get a degree in education and then I'm going to do something with it. You can minor in it, which is what I did. And you can do a lot of teaching hours and things like that, but it's not the same as saying like, you know, you majored or graduated with a degree in so-and-so. Mm-hmm. I actually graduated with a degree in business. It was management science in particular.
Oh. Well, there you go. That's really cool.
It was really hard for me to really figure out what I wanted to do because of the current situation of everything. And that's completely normal. And I like to tell students that's completely normal to be in this sort of situation where you don't know what you want to do.
Right. Because you don't want to for me, I didn't want to disappoint anyone either.
Yep,
you
for sure.
You went to the school and it's like they expect you to be a brain surgeon. And I'm like, I'm terrible. It's not for me. So yeah, I totally hear you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's not that you can't do it, because that's the other thing. People think, oh, you don't want to be an engineer because you can't become an engineer. Maybe you're not smart enough. And it's like, no, you have to recognize that you can. If you want to, you can do that. It's just not what you want to do. Yeah. And what you want to do should have the same amount of value as, you know, what other people think is supposedly more valuable, whatever that is.
I love it. That's
so a lot of it is outdoor, like impressions from the school, from your family, from your friends. And I think that's the hardest because you don't want to feel like you're a disappointment. You don't want to feel like an imposter. Ooh. You don't want to feel like, oh, I don't belong here. Yep. And that all went on during that time period. I ended up, getting out of it due to help from the mental health and also from just realizing that, you know what, I can, make my own path to doing whatever I want to do. So that's kind of the beginnings of the entrepreneur side. And what my mom always said is like, I always knew you would go into like business and make your own business.
Oh, so supportive. I love it.
Awesome. Even though, I always was like, no, I'm going to become a researcher or something.
She's like, oh, you're a business person. It's fine. What did she see in you? That she was like, I always knew you're going to be a business person.
She's like, well, I'm a business person, so you're going to be a business person.
Yes, you're right. You didn't tell what your mom does.
So my mom does a lot of things. Both of my parents own businesses, and they own separate businesses because they can't work together.
Uh-oh. That's real life. Yep. Cool.
So they actually their first business is they do taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art. So my dad is actually a grandmaster in taekwondo. He's like an undefeated national champion sort of thing. Cool. So he's very impressive on that front. His academic front is not very impressive. He always said he was the last in school or the first from the bottom.
That's right. It's got to start somewhere and then you got to go up. The first step. I understand.
So he does taekwondo. And my mom, what's really cool about my mom didn't know any taekwondo before she met my dad. But she was like, if he could do it, I could do it. So.
Good for her. Oh, your mom sounds so cool.
So she took over the business, and then she was like, oh, you know what? I can do business better than you. So she had her own taekwondo business, and my dad had his own.
like right next door, like competing.
It's in different cities, but yeah, they were competing.
Yeah, I understand. That's great.
So yeah, she's a awesome. Super inspirational on that end. And then later on, she branches out and does a whole bunch of other stuff. Like she sees business opportunities everywhere. So,
what is your mom your main inspiration?
yeah, I think so. She definitely is my main inspiration, and I think, just the fact of who she is and the way her story and the way she carries herself. Like my mom is 5 foot. That's pretty short.
You went from MIT, you're like, all right, I'm gonna get into business. And then how was Elementari.io born?
So first of all, I actually first went into research with education. So I did educational technology research. I was researching a lot of stuff with games and education, in particular, also scientific inquiry and education. That was my research mainly at MIT. I carried that over. I went to Taiwan actually, because I met a boy and I ended up in Taiwan. So I was there and I did my research then on language acquisition because then I could have my experiments done in English, so rather than Chinese.
So smart.
So cool. I changed over to language acquisition. But since I had the roots in, engineering and STEM, I think that really inspired a lot of the ways I saw language acquisition, how we can make things more engaging. And so originally it started from my thesis, but it got it didn't really go forward at my university. I actually dropped out of university to work on Elementari full time with my partner. And we moved to France to do that because we couldn't have visas anymore in the country.
Oh. What? You're on the motorcycle. You're just going for it. Good for you. So you're just like all the other edtech people that so you dropped out of school to finish this, and now you're an entrepreneuress.
So now I'm selling to schools and teachers now that the product's actually kind of developed. All the way.
How long ago? Like, when did you decide, all right, I'm going for it? When was that?
We decided in 2016. The problem is I don't know how to code websites, so I had to learn. Of course. Very cool. My partner and myself were like, oh, well, we guess we have to learn how to code a website. So we took some time to dig in and learn. And I started out with like a tutorial on like Django for girls, which is, by the way, a really good tutorial on how to create a simple blog.
Wow. And that's 5 years ago. Now you're like a coding. So all the things on Elementari you coded.
Yes, my partner and I, we code everything. So everything is developed in-house and basically self-funded. So
brilliant. Okay. Yep. So I would love to see a demo. It is. So walk me through it. What is Elementari?
Yeah, so the first step is that it's digital storytelling. So Elementari is an online platform where you can create, share, publish digital stories, interactive stories or games. But the first step is always you can create a story. So if you're teaching like young students from K to 2, you could just use it to create simple picture books with all the different background elements we have. We can go through and find, some animals that we like. Here's a cute sheep. Let's add the sheep, and we can make the sheep say something, for example. Hello, everyone. And this is my amazing story. So it works a lot like Google Slides and PowerPoint. You can go ahead and change the font into something unreadable. That's what kids like to do, at least mine. And then you can add pages on the side, just like with Google Slides and PowerPoint. And then after that, you can publish. But that's just half of it. So half of it is, designing your page, creating your page, adding different shapes if you want, things like that. The other half of Elementari is how we can code our stories to become interactive, or how we can turn our stories into games. And to do that, we click on this button at the top. It's called Event Graph, and it flips the page over to the back side where we can then code all of our interactions.
Wow.
So on the right-hand side, you'll notice that we have functions, variables, logic, events, and objects. So these terms are all computer science terms, or in functions, it's also a math term. And we use these terms so students can become familiar with the vocabulary without actually knowing their coding. So compared to like other coding platforms, like maybe code.org or Tinker, our objective is not really to teach your kid how to code. It's to get your kid to create a really cool product that they can be proud of. And so coding just becomes a way for them to make their stories cool. So let me just give you a quick example.
So the child is coding.
Yeah, so the child will be coding without really knowing he's coding because he just wants to make their story cool. It's like, I want to make, my sheep jump, for example. So I have a function. Functions are like our actions. They tell the computer what action to do. So you can like play music, play a recorded sound, move, blink. And I like bounce because bounce is pretty fun. And you'll also notice, if you're familiar with block-based coding, it's a little bit different. So we have these little triangles. So this triangle then connects to the triangle here. And the purple circle here connects to the purple circle here. So this is an example of what is called node-based visual programming. And node-based visual programming is used in the real world. So one misconception is, oh, block-based coding is just for babies and real coders use JavaScript and Python. And by the way, 10 years from now, we'll see if JavaScript and Python are really used all the time.
Wow, so fast tech moves, yeah. Yeah.
So the main thing is we want kids to understand what is called computational thinking, which is understanding the logic, the process, and when you're creating games, even like understanding how can we design narratives to be like branching or nonlinear or like an app, because the way that we think about how we create these things will be different than a regular book that starts from page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Right.
So I connect things like this, and node-based visual programming is used in software like Unreal Engine, Unity, Houdini, Blender. Those are all professional software. Those probably mean nothing to you, but your kids will definitely know games like Rocket League or Fortnite or Kingdom Hearts 3, Final Fantasy VII Remake. You've probably watched movies like Moana or Lord of the Rings. And
they all use node-based digital programs.
So the softwares that basically develop these games and these animations have a node-based visual programming inside of the software. It's optional, but it's included in the software. So if you download these softwares, or especially with like the animation software, that's all like almost node-based visual programming. So whenever you see the CGI and stuff, a lot of that is done by animators. They're not like coders. So they use node-based visual programming to code all their animations. I don't know if you saw our little thing just bounced.
Oh, he did just bounce. So this is kind of like if I wanted to be like an Imagineer kind of Pixar person, this is where I'd start if I'm in second grade.
Yeah. And it's also just a really great way to just introduce coding, I think. So you could say like, oh, here you go. We have our sheep is now going to bounce 1 billion times. And you could be like, okay, this hello everyone is kind of weird if it's not bouncing with it, right? So what we can do is we can grab our object and we can connect it together. And now they'll all bounce together.
That's so cool. And the kids can play around on this on their own, but you also teach them, or there's ways for teachers to learn. Because what if I'm a teacher? I don't know how to code. How do I?
Yeah, so I have a lot of curriculum that goes through how to code, but really I think the main objective is to start with a project that you want to do. And the coding will kind of come to some students, and those students will then take the lead to teach others. So there's tutorials here. The first one that people will see is how to make this dragon fly. That's the automatic tutorial. So like it's very... like there's only one thing that you can do on this page. I can only click on the next button now. I have arrows that tell me what to click on. So the kids will do this and they can do that on their own, probably starting second grade, virtual. So if you're full virtual, second graders are pretty okay with this. And
There you
This
go.
is the tutorial. So you have other tutorials. There's also video tutorials, and there's specifically curriculum that you can assign to your class that goes through the specific coding concepts if you really want to dive into that. But most of the teachers that I deal with are like ELA teachers. So their objective is really
Wow.
to just get their kids to write more. So
Right.
having the images and the coding are just different ways to engage students to write more
And this is
and practice their writing, or also practice their speaking by recording a voiceover, for example. So yeah, most of the teachers I deal with are ELA teachers, gifted teachers, science teachers, but not also not just like STEM specialists, but like actual like the science teacher that teaches the science classes, who do like, oh, they want to create a book on the water cycle, or they want their students to write a story about a periodic table element, for example.
Wow.
So this is just a way for students to express themselves, because they can do anything from the simple, picture book all the way up to like a simulation game, for example. So
thank you so much for sharing. I'm just so excited. Like this is amazing. So thank you so much for your time. And it was really, really wonderful to hear how you went from kindergarten day one, not being able to speak English, to creating such a beautiful, highly engaging, highly interactive and interdisciplinary Elementari.io. So I guess my first question is, what words of encouragement do you have for families, or for people that are, women of color even, that, haven't gotten that inspiration yet? What would you say to them?
well, I think the main thing is, if you find something that you think is worth fighting for, or something that you strongly believe in, just don't give up. I think it's so easy to give up. My life would be 10 times, a billion times easier if I didn't do elementary. But if you believe in your cause and what you want to accomplish, then all that difficulty will be worth it at some point. I'm still waiting for, the big high for me, but I am seeing, I really do enjoy doing what I do, simply because now I feel like I can affect more people than I would if I were to be a teacher. Like as a teacher, I have my classroom of, let's say, maybe 200 kids, or maybe I train teachers and I have my group of 200 teachers. But now I can actually affect teachers in schools worldwide, which I think is incredible. And I'm really, really, really grateful that some of these teachers have reached out to me to tell me their stories about how maybe some of their kids who didn't like writing at all of a sudden take some more time to write now. Or maybe they have some students who really take off and they spend 3 hours on it. So it's really easy to give up. And the last thing would just be like, just if you believe in what you do, then keep going at it, because everybody will be kind of against you until you really succeed.
They're like,
that's the
I
truth
knew
of
it.
That's the truth of it. It's harsh, but that's the truth. It's like when you're in your deepest and darkest moments, people will be like, "Oh, what are you doing? You're so dumb. Why don't you just
And there's a lot of doubts. Why would you do that? Why would you think that? Why? But when you're blazing your own trail, it's never been done before. So people are like, is it even possible to succeed? And you create something so beautiful like your company and your story. It's just very inspiring. So it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Nicole, for being here and for really inspiring everyone that's watching this. And anyone that's interested, check out Elementari.io, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.